What if I told you that, without oral arguments, without weeks of public debate, and without most Americans even realizing it was happening, the Supreme Court just issued an emergency decision that could quietly reshape how national law works going forward? That's not hype. That's exactly what happened. In a 6-3 emergency ruling, the High Court stepped in, moved fast, and sent a signal that is already rippling through courts, agencies, and lawmakers across the country. And whether you agree with the outcome or not, this decision matters far beyond the single case involved. When people think about Supreme Court rulings, they usually imagine long-anticipated decisions released in June, following months of oral arguments and national attention. But that's not how this one happened. This was an emergency ruling, issued through what's known as the court's shadow docket. That alone should make you pause, because emergency decisions are not routine, and they're not supposed to be used lightly. Yet here we are, with a 6-3 decision that immediately affects how the law is applied nationwide. To understand why this ruling is such a big deal, we need to talk first about what an emergency decision actually is. Unlike normal Supreme Court cases, emergency applications are requests asking the court to intervene right now, usually to stop or enforce a lower court ruling while the full case is still working its way through the system. These decisions don't come with long explanations. Sometimes they come with no explanation at all, but they can be just as powerful, if not more so, because they take effect immediately. In this case, the High Court was asked to step in because lower courts had issued conflicting rulings, creating legal chaos across different states and jurisdictions. One set of rules applied in some parts of the country, while completely different rules applied elsewhere. That kind of patchwork doesn't just confuse citizens. It puts government agencies, businesses, and courts in an impossible position. The Supreme Court saw that conflict and decided it could not wait. The 6-3 split is also telling. This was not a unanimous decision. It reflects a deep philosophical divide on the court about how much power federal institutions should have, how quickly courts should intervene, and what role the judiciary plays when national law is in flux. The majority believed that immediate action was necessary to prevent further damage and instability. The dissenting justices, however, warned that moving this fast could set a dangerous precedent. And that concern is not insignificant. The shadow docket has become one of the most controversial aspects of the modern Supreme Court. Critics argue that emergency rulings allow major legal changes to happen without transparency. Supporters argue that emergencies require speed, not ceremony. This ruling sits right at the center of that debate. So what did the court actually do? In practical terms, the High Court either paused or enforced a lower court decision that directly impacts how national law is applied right now. That means agencies must adjust their actions immediately. Courts must follow the Supreme Court's directive starting now, not months from now. And ongoing cases around the country are suddenly operating under a new legal reality. This is where the ripple effects begin. When the Supreme Court intervenes on an emergency basis, it sends a message to every lower court in the country. That message is not just about the specific case. It's about how the justices are thinking. Judges take notice. Attorneys take notice. Regulators take notice. And once that signal is sent, it shapes decisions far beyond the original dispute. Another reason this ruling matters is timing. Emergency decisions often come when the court believes delay would cause irreversible harm. That suggests the justices saw real consequences unfolding in real time. Whether that harm involved constitutional rights, federal authority, or legal uniformity, the court clearly believed waiting was not an option. The dissenting opinions, though fewer in number, are just as important to understand. They raised concerns about judicial overreach and warned that emergency intervention should not replace the normal legal process. They argued that the court should have allowed the case to develop more fully before stepping in. In their view, speed came at the expense of deliberation. This tension reveals something deeper about the modern Supreme Court. We are living in an era where legal battles move fast, political pressure is intense, and the court is increasingly asked to act as a stabilizing force in moments of national conflict. Emergency rulings are becoming more frequent not because the court wants them to be, but because the legal system keeps producing emergencies. It's also worth noting that this 6-3 decision did not come out of nowhere. It sits on top of years of legal disputes, conflicting interpretations, and unresolved constitutional questions. The emergency ruling is not the final word. The full case may still come back to the court later for a complete hearing. But make no mistake, what the court did here sets the tone for what comes next. For everyday Americans, this ruling might feel distant or abstract, but its impact is very real. When the Supreme Court adjusts the legal framework, it affects how laws are enforced, how rights are interpreted, and how much power agencies and officials actually have. Even if you never read the ruling itself, you may feel its effects through policy changes, enforcement decisions, or court outcomes down the road. This also raises an important question. How much power should the Supreme Court exercise through emergency decisions? Some legal scholars argue that the shadow docket is becoming a parallel system of lawmaking, one that operates with less transparency and fewer safeguards. Others argue that refusing to act in emergencies would be irresponsible and harmful. This ruling will likely fuel that debate even further. Another key aspect of this decision is what it tells us about the court's current majority. A 6-3 split suggests alignment among the majority justices on core principles, even when acting quickly. That unity increases the likelihood that similar emergency rulings could follow in the future, especially in cases involving national policy or constitutional questions. At the same time, the dissent highlights that nothing about this is settled. The legal arguments raised by the minority may resurface when the case returns in full form. That means this ruling is both powerful and provisional. It shapes the present, but the future remains contested. What happens next depends on several factors. Lower courts will now adjust their rulings to comply with the Supreme Court's decision. Agencies will revise guidance and enforcement strategies. Lawyers will reshape their arguments. And the parties involved may prepare for the next phase of litigation, knowing that the High Court is already watching closely. This is why it's so important not to dismiss emergency rulings as minor or temporary. They often reveal more about the court's direction than full opinions do. They show what the justices are willing to do when the pressure is on, when time is short, and when the stakes are high. In many ways, this decision reflects the broader reality of modern governance. Laws are challenged faster. Policies change quicker. Crises emerge suddenly. And the Supreme Court is increasingly asked to act not just as an interpreter of the Constitution, but as a referee in real-time disputes with national consequences. Whether you view this ruling as a necessary intervention or a troubling shortcut, one thing is undeniable. It matters. It affects how national law is applied today, not years from now. And it signals that the High Court is willing to use its emergency powers when it believes the moment demands it. As more details emerge and legal experts continue to analyze the ruling, the full significance will become clearer. But the headline is already written. A 6-3 emergency decision. Immediate nationwide impact. And a Supreme Court that is once again reminding the country that it has the final say, even when the clock is ticking. This is exactly why staying informed matters. Not every major legal shift comes with a dramatic announcement or a primetime address. Sometimes, the most consequential changes happen quietly, through emergency orders that most people never read. But those decisions still shape the rules we all live under. So as this story continues to develop, pay close attention. Watch how lower courts respond. Watch how agencies adapt. And watch how the Supreme Court uses its emergency authority going forward. Because this ruling is not just about one case. It's about how national law is being shaped in real time. If you want to stay ahead of these developments, understand what's really happening behind the headlines, and know how these decisions affect the country as a whole, make sure you're subscribed and staying engaged. The legal landscape is moving fast, and this is only the beginning.